This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 538, Agentic Development Workflows. On today's show, we're talking about development workflows, agentic agents, and how they work together with our guests, Andy Giles and Matt Glaman. We'll also cover Drupal Canvas CLI as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guests today are Andy Giles and Matt Glaman. Andy Giles is a veteran web developer and Drupal specialist. In 2012, he founded Blue Oak Interactive, a development and consulting agency focused on complex Drupal site builds, particularly in e-commerce. In 2025, he partnered with the Mike Herschel to launch DripYard, a premium Drupal theme designed to reduce the cost of ownership and enhance the developer's experience for modern Drupal projects. Andy, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be back.
And Matt has been using Drupal since 2012. Currently a principal software engineer at Acquia, he serves as a technical lead for Acquia Source, a Drupal-based SaaS leveraging Drupal Canvas. Matt is the maintainer of PHP Stand Drupal and Drupal what?
MRN.
MRN. Thank you. Wow, that all really ran together, and I was like, I don't know what letters those are. Matt, welcome back, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right. Before we continue, Andy, I do want to thank you for being here for the last 4 weeks. It was great having you, and we look forward to having you back sometime soon.
Yeah, it's been fun.
You don't have to lie.
Well, it was only my third week. I played hooky last week.
Yeah, well,
I apologize.
sometimes things come up, like we said. I'm John Picozzi, solutions architect at EPAM, and today my co-host is Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development. Nick, you got some snow?
Yeah, happy to be here. We got some snow. Maybe I'll share a picture. There are snow drifts basically covering my wife's Prius, or there was snow drifts, or there were snow drifts covering my wife's Prius yesterday. It took me a good 4 hours to dig out. I mean, you've been here. I don't have a huge driveway. It was a lot of work. And then it snowed again last night, another 4 or 5 inches, and it's
That
still
was the big
snow.
shocker because they were like, "Oh, it's gonna be over by Monday afternoon." And I was like, "Okay, go out and do all the snow." And then this morning I woke up, I was out there with a shovel like,
Yeah,
It's a
no,
good
we got
workout though. If you don't have like heart problems, I recommend shoveling snow. It's a good workout.
Yeah, there was enough snow that yesterday, even, like, walking out to the snowblower through 3 feet of snow was a workout. Like, I got to the snowblower, I'm like, "Okay, I need a break. Give me a minute before I shovel this out
All those
and,
people in like
get it
warm
going."
locations right now are like, "Snow, huh, these guys."
I will say, here's a tip for people that are in places where you may get infrequent snow. Get, rubber overalls and a rubber jacket, and you will never suffer in inclement weather again. I mean, it keeps you warm. I also discovered a few years ago that wearing a face mask keeps you really warm. So I just whip one of those out and keeps the snow out of your face, keeps you warm, and
Ski goggles, man. Ski goggles when you're snow blowing are the best
those
thing
are
ever.
pretty important too. Yeah, because it was also very cold. Like this weekend, it got down to -2 degrees Fahrenheit, which is -19 Celsius. So yeah, it was you had to be
You know
careful.
what? We should do a spin-off podcast talking weather. I feel like that would be popular. All right. And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a principal solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to sync components from a site using Drupal Canvas out to another project like a headless front end, or conversely from an outside repo into Drupal Canvas? There's an NPM library for that. It's called Drupal Canvas CLI, and it was created in July 2025, originally as Experience Builder CLI by Belinda Clary of Acquia. It has a 0.6.2 version available, and it's really only useful with Drupal Canvas, which works with Drupal core 11.2 or newer. It is actively maintained, and it has 8 open issues, 2 of which are bugs, but one of which was marked as fixed in the past week. According to NPM JS, it gets 128 weekly downloads, and With the Drupal Canvas CLI installed, you'll have a command line tool that allows you to download or export components from Canvas into your local file system. There are options to download just the components, just the global CSS, or everything, and a few other options. If no flags are provided, the tool will interactively prompt you for which options you want to use. There is also an upload command with a similar set of options. It's worth noting that the upload will also automatically run the build and validate commands, ensuring that the uploaded components will work smoothly with Drupal Canvas. I thought this would be relevant to our topic today because with this tool, you can create a React component with the aid of the AI integration available for Canvas and then sync that either to a headless front end built in something like Next.js or Astro, or to a tool like Storybook locally. Or you could use an AI enhanced tool like Cursor IDE to build a component locally and then sync that into a Drupal site using Canvas. Now, there is also a blog post by Ballant that we'll have linked in the show notes that includes a demo video if you want to see this tool in action. But let's talk about Drupal Canvas CLI.
I have so many questions. Okay, so you mentioned React, you mentioned Storybook. That's all cool. What about if I were using like web components in Storybook? Would those come
N-
over?
No, because Canvas doesn't use web components. Canvas uses Preact or well, React under the hood. So I'm on the same team as Ballant, as like one of the foundation teams that works on this. And Drupal Canvas supports JavaScript based components, but realistically, they're JSX under the hood.
But
So you can't use like a web component. I mean, you probably could,
I was
but
gonna
the
say
CLI is
Well,
it's
okay.
just JavaScript and
not just,
HTML.
and I
How
don't want to like necessarily go down to that rabbit hole, but to
you
to
you
just no, not
Well,
like Canvas uses Preact under the hood and
yes,
uses JSX written components.
got it.
And like, let's just leave it at that because the CLI is also based around building those kind of components and Tailwind because
okay.
that's how Canvas works right now.
So it's
So
focused
Okay.
on the React and Tailwind based components.
correct. Now, could it be
Okay.
Uh,
expanded for like regular web components or other like things? I'm sure, but just like help level set how it works and what it's based on right now.
So just to be clear, you're saying that the CLI will only work with those ones, but Canvas will work with
Code
anything that
components.
yeah. Okay, okay. Got it, got it, got it.
It's useful. You use it for the code components. So whatever works in code
oh,
components. So you don't use
oh,
this for your SDCs. That's
okay. There we go. That
Yeah,
was the
there's
problem.
that's the piece I
Okay.
was confused
So
about.
just to clear it up for for our dear listeners here, this is a tool to export and potentially import components that you create through Canvas's UI, basically.
which actually, let's flip it on its head. This lets front-end developers write components and put them in a Drupal site without needing to know Drupal or touch Drupal.
And then this is a
Got it.
tool for the
Okay.
developer of the site to pull it out and put it into
Yeah.
Git.
And there are gonna be some really cool things coming. I don't wanna spoil a lot, such as, like, syncing, like, GitHub workflows that could be used, or maybe
Okay,
things that provide AI skills to know how to work with components, because if you look at Shad UNCI or whatever Shad U wow,
Shit,
Should
whatever
CI.
that
see a new
library
way.
is, yeah, the way that it builds components are in ways that aren't necessarily compatible inside Drupal Canvas. So there's actually, like, an agent file that helps explain how to write components that work with Canvas because it's not like running a full React application.
Okay. So
mhm,
let's
got
go
it.
back to this module.
Yeah.
And well, is it sorry, Martin,
Is
is
this
it
the
is
first NPM project in Module of the Week,
got it.
Martin? I think it
That's
is.
what
It
Did you cover
could
API
be.
client before?
I feel like there might have been something else that we did that was on NPM, but at the moment, I'm drawing a blank. I know we've done a bunch of other things, including Drupal MRN, actually, but it might
so
be the first. I'm not sure.
okay. So npm package, Drupal Canvas CLI, got it. Matt or Martin, workflow here, right? So if I'm going to use this, is you're thinking that my front end developers take their code, put it into Drupal, and then one of my developers uses Drupal Canvas CLI to kind of export that code, that that component from Drupal, put it into the code base, and then could potentially put it somewhere else if they wanted to? Is that the idea?
So the way I think of it is, and this is where some, I think normal Drupalists will go and clutch some pearls. But what if you didn't manage your code components in config export and config sync, but you let your front end team manage it via the CLI? So, like you as a Drupal developer are like, we're deploying Canvas. Like we're deploying our our Drupal site that has Canvas with like some of the content templates and the page regions. But when it comes to the code components, that's actually governed via another Git repo and uploaded via the CLI and managed that way. So you're not managing the code components via config sync. Or you can make a development flow that says, hey, I'm going to make sure I get them all uploaded to our local environment, whatever, and export the config. But we're going to let front end developers build React components their normal way and use the CLI as an easy way to get them into Drupal as the underlying config components.
So you're basically saying that your components directory would be a different repo that the front end team is managing and maintaining.
Yeah, could
Yeah.
be, doesn't have
Okay.
to be. I mean, if you like the little built-in code editor inside Canvas, like, get on it.
Yeah.
It's just this would allow, like, for the it's kind of like going back to the whole headless Drupal conversation.
Mhm.
It made sense for big organizations that can maintain 2 repos with 2 different teams, but
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense for everybody all the time.
Mhm.
But if there are companies that have dedicated front-end developers that don't need to know Drupalisms, that could leverage this to streamline their development.
Yeah. Okay. That all makes sense to me, and I mean, I don't know, I'm not necessarily clutching my pearls on the, like, separate component repo because, we live in a get off the Drupal island sorta world, and sometimes you wanna use your components in other places other than in your kick-ass CMS. But, yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think that Go ahead, Martin.
Oh, I just wanted to point out that I think the other thing that's really sort of closes the loop on is really using Drupal Canvas as a page layout builder for headless sites. So that idea of being able to say, within Drupal, I can create custom layouts using Drupal Canvas, and those will appear the same way in like Next.js or Astro or some other headless framework, as long as it's sort of again using React.
Mhm.
And I think that's really powerful. I think for a while Drupal has had kind of not had that capability where some other headless CMSs did. And I think this is important for Drupal to sort of, stay in that arms race from a headless standpoint in terms of offering that as a capability that, marketing teams want to be able to create those one-off landing pages.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody argues with the flexibility, right? Marketing teams want the flexibility. Component libraries provide that flexibility in a lot of cases. And component libraries backed by a component-based design system, like 10x that sort of structure and that ability to kind of move fast. It's interesting because I'm working on a project right now with a component-based design system. We're building components. However, and that's why I asked the web component question, we are using a design system as a starting point, and we're focusing on the web components aspect and going to move those into single directory components in Drupal and use them within Canvas. So that's where my question originally came from. But you
Yeah.
know, everybody's got to start somewhere. So starting with what comes out of the box with the React stuff makes a ton of sense. And I've seen the video for this. It is very cool. So, highly recommend in your free time, folks, go watch the video. All right, Martin, thank you again for bringing us a great module or NPM package of the week. And if folks wanted to suggest a module, NPM package recipe, or something for this segment, where could they find you and how could they do that?
We are always happy to talk about candidates for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as Man Clue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Wonderful. See you next week, Martin.
See you then.
Then
All right. Let's talk about agentic development workflows. But before we talk about them, let's maybe explain a little bit about what we mean by them. Andy, can you kind of give us an overview of like, I don't know, what is an agentic development workflow?
Sure. Yeah. I think it It might change every week, but as far as this week's concerned, I feel like, it's organizing tasks or requirements and then spinning off an AI agent to help you get through each of those tasks. And kind of the smaller the tasks, the better. And the more of a feedback loop you can provide the agent where it can make a change, validate it, run tests, do code linting, whatever it needs to be, and then report back that it's actually completed that task, the better. And so that's kind of
And, and
how I
those
would describe it, I guess.
and those tasks are typically things that you're repeating over and over again, right? You're not just building an agent to do like one thing one time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Typically, if you're gonna like create an agent to do something, yeah, it'd be reused over and over. But
I
I
think
think, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I'll say before we get too far,
Yeah,
maybe everybody doesn't know what it means by an agent. And this is
Sure.
always the baseline because like everything about the whole AI, everything is so magical. But when you really break it down to its simplest forms, it's like, oh, think about most people when they interact with generative AI, they do a chat interface.
Hmm.
Gemini, ChatGPT, you type chat, it might do some thinking and then it gives you back a response. Take that thinking thing where it comes up with an answer, but then it checks itself and maybe refines. Consider that like an agentic flow because it is working with itself. But in the end, a chat is not agentic because it asks for your feedback. But when we talk about agents, that's where it's something that can go. It's given a task and it has tools available to validate and see if it's achieved that outcome, which is a little bit, it's similar to like giving it a chat and getting an answer. There's usually more things involved, such as other data sources and other transformations. So again, it's not that much fancier than like when you go through your chat, but just think of it as a long running chat that can go by itself and access more tools.
So, Matt, I struggle sometimes with this because I kind of know the answer, but I'm also thinking that maybe our listeners would be have the same question right now. Like, how's that different from an automation? Is it because you're giving it tools to kind of make its own choices?
So yes, because it's different than an automation, right? We can write automated scripts all we want to handle these things, but think of it with quote unquote intelligence. You know, and actually there's a great book that they describe AI as alien intelligence because we don't like it's not artificial. There is some things happening there and we don't know what they are, so it's alien to us. But think of it as a way instead of having to hard code all of the possible situations that might occur,
Yeah.
like, you know what? Do this, but now I've got this magical algorithm that can help create a decision for me. And
Hmm.
that's where we used to call it machine learning and machine learning algorithms. Now, since it's a little bit more robust, or whether some people want to call it the same thing, you have it as the AI aid. The AI can make these more fluid decisions for us.
So an agent always has some sort of AI backend that is helping it to determine like what the best path forward is, right?
Yeah, and access to tools. And the tools could be accessing the data. Like, great example, web search. Like, oh, I'm going to go do something. It can web search. It can fetch data from a database. It can look up history or like the vector databases. It can just do a little bit more.
Got it. So it has kind of like tools, like you said, like helpers to be able to do some of these extra steps. And today we're talking specifically about applying these agents to your development workflow. So I'm interested to see how this conversation progresses and I'm sure I'm gonna learn a whole bunch. So I'm looking forward to that one.
So so how is agentic coding different from the traditional autocomplete or chat-based coding help? So you s it sounds like chat can be related, but is not exactly the same thing.
Yeah. So chat can be related. And I wish I could remember this resource. And I'll try to find it so we can put it in the show notes. But it explained how autocomplete AIs are trained. Essentially, you take code and you have a model look at it, but then you cut a part of the code. You like literally slice away the code and it learns on how to do guessing what the next line should be. So like how everybody's told us that Gen AI is just guessing what the next word should be. It's much more complex than that, but that's literally what training for autocomplete is. And that's not agentic coding. That's just a smart autocomplete. Where agentic coding is it writes code itself, but then can run PHP CS. It can run PHP stand. It reads the validation errors from PHP stand and then goes, oh, I used Drupal as I fetch the service statically when I should do dependency injection. And then it goes and says, I have errors. And then it fixes those errors and runs the validation again before it comes back and prompts you. So again, kind of thinking like that chat would have been like, I have errors. What do you want me to do about it? And then you would say, go fix the errors. This way it's self-correcting.
So, okay, this so it can self-correct, but it doesn't, like, learn and fix that stuff in the first place. It just has extra tools. So it's more computationally more expensive because it's probably producing the bad code first, running a
Well,
check, then
I
fixing
actually
whatever it found.
I would disagree there because it doesn't I love seeing the posts where people like, I used AI and it wrote bad code. Remember, AI is like having a college level or like a PhD doctorate that is extremely intelligent, but it's their first day on the job and like needs to know the nooks and crannies. So if you have good code examples in your code base, it should write things up to standard. Here's actually a great example of where it wrote great code, but I asked it to review itself and it found a implementation that we use for feature flags that I forgot about. But in its review, it found that and then course corrected the code itself. And so computationally more expensive, maybe, but it also saved me 2 hours of time and did a fix in 5 minutes and created a more technically sound code base because there's a whole design paradigm that I forgot about that normal like linting tools would not have found.
Hmm.
I do want to give a caveat about computation and bad code up front because there are those experiences, but that doesn't mean it's always a bad thing.
So, I mean, like, I'm I'm envisioning an example of this in my head where it's like you showed the AI a picture of a puzzle, and then you took and the puzzle was of an ice cream cone, right? And, like, you took the bottom half of the puzzle and just threw it out, and then you said, "AI, like, finish this puzzle for me," right? And it went through and it finished the puzzle, but, like, instead of putting the ice cream in an ice cream cone, it put it in a boot, right? Like,
And then
mm,
check the box and said, "Did I do it right?" And
you're
then it would go,
right.
"No," and then
And you went, "No," and it goes, "Ah, okay, let me try again," and it redid it, and, like, maybe the second time it was, like, in a bowl instead of a cone, like, "Hey, we're getting a little closer,
Huh.
okay, okay, that makes sense."
Yeah, and I think the biggest part of all this, obviously, is the context that the AI has, and the agent like, when you set up an agent and the tools, it's able to resolve its own context, like Matt said. So, it can query a database, or it can go browse the web, or it can render your site in, like, a Playwright MCP and bring back, like, a screenshot and then say, "Okay, well, the button's not in the right place. Let me iterate on that until it is in the right place." And it's just able to resolve that context by itself without you having to be in the loop saying, no, you did it wrong, or copying, pasting back and forth between ChatGPT or something like that. So it's more of just an automated workflow where you give it a task, it figures out what it needs to do, iterates on it, goes, gets more context, and keeps going until like basically hits the finish line with whatever you
O
asked it to do.
okay, so then I have a couple of questions then about that piece of it. So you have let's say you have a moderately complex task that takes something like that. It takes a you wanna add a button to a page, it needs to follow general patterns, it needs to look up a couple of references to find the UX, and it needs to run the MCP. The MCP bit I mean, the playwright bit takes, I don't know, let's say 45 seconds. How long is a task like that going to take? Is it 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour?
I think
And
it's
and what are you
5
doing while
minutes.
it's running?
Well, I think what the goal is that you set up a bunch of different tasks and you have a bunch of different agents run at the same time doing each task individually, almost like, feature request per agent or even smaller than that, little bits of work, right? And a good example of this is with DripYard, we develop themes, but we need a lot of content for demo themes that aren't real businesses, right? So you can generate that with AI. You can go to ChatGPT and write a bunch of copy and pictures and all this stuff. Or you can write an agent, which is what I've done, that will take the concept, it'll do some research, and then write a markdown file. And then another agent will come along and read that markdown file and generate images from the markdown. And then another agent will come along and pick up that and go into Canvas with Playwright MCP and click through the design and put things where they need to be, save it, and then report back, hey, I've updated the landing page with the stuff you've asked.
Yeah.
And so that's like a multi-agent workflow wrapping one larger task, but just an example of what you could do.
Yeah. And I think the big question about like, what do you do? It's like you've earned time. You've
Yeah.
earned 5 minutes, 10 minutes of time where what would you do if you were writing code in those minutes when you hit a roadblock? You would kind of think of the solution and then move on to the next step. So think of it as when you have that downtime, you could double your productivity by having a multi-agent thing or multitask, or you can say, okay, I've figured out the next part. It's very like on my personal blog, I did a little redesign and I was using anti-gravity and the browser sub agent, and it was verifying some of the design components. And that gave me a chance to watch verified. I was like, oh, I forgot. I added basic dark mode support. And I was like, then I queued up the next prompt that said, great. Can you now make sure that you toggle dark mode and verify this thing? Or as I was reviewing the work in progress, I was thinking about my next steps in the solutions. So it's one of those like, if you do start diving into this agentic coding, you're less of just like churning out lines of code, but you're an orchestrator and you're coming up with solutions. You're thinking more about the solutions. That's one reason I think it is neat. I am kind of worried about like the junior developer that cuts their teeth writing code, but it's more about building solutions and outcomes than just dumping lines of code every single day, every single minute.
So question on that, right? So you're saying, "Hey, it's saving me time writing code," which great, sounds good, but, like, I'm assuming you have to create the agent and train the agent as to what to produce or what to what references to learn from and in order to produce that outcome, right? So, I mean, there's some time there, right?
I
Not a
would say
lot.
there's not much training. Like, it's actually like, like a year ago, getting it to write modern Drupal code was a painful, and now it just like excels. Most agents do if you're using like Claude Sonnet or even Gemini Pro, which is what I use a lot personally. Like at work, it's all Claude Sonnet. Personally, it's Gemini Pro. And really, I'm just writing the definition of done. I'm writing scope, like any developer should be doing with their tickets and working with their
Yeah.
like, stakeholders. And then I feed it at that. And a lot of times I even ask it, I'm like, hey, I want to do this thing. Does it look okay? And then it gives me there's like planning mode. So that's actually one thing we didn't cover here is like agentic coding. There's like a plan mode where you can give it a scope and thing that you want it to do, and it will help you plan. And then you can switch to the agent mode, which is like, great, I'll go do the implementation of it.
Yeah.
So, it's one that I've even used it to help me work through as I'm coming up with, like, an architecture diagram or things like that to, like, review the code base. Here's what I wanna build. Help me come up with the plan so I can actually hand it off correctly to my team. So
Yeah.
that way I'm not the bottleneck here.
Right. That makes
Yeah, and I think, like, when you hear agent and training and all this stuff, like, that sounds complicated, but the most simple agent is really just like a markdown file that tells, you know, the AI or the tooling that's communicating with the AI, like Claude Code, how to do the task you want. So, for example, you could create a markdown file that's like how to access the Drupal database, and it just runs drush SQLC. And, the LLM is familiar enough with SQL to like discover tables in the database and that kind of stuff. And then you could just say, like, go get me the schema for this table or whatever. And then that agent knows how to do it. You could get more complex and you can use MCPs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's just like a pre prompt almost for the most simple agent. So, like,
so
another example is like if you wanted to, write customize Drupal module that you're working on, like you tell the agent and the instructions to go look at other modules in the file system and then, you know, iterate on that. So like the more context you can give it, the more like
mm,
here's the color between the lines kind of, prompt for you. Don't go out of this, the better your results can be.
So, okay. So you got Claude code running, you're using like your Claude MD file to kind of like update and say, "Hey, when I say go connect to this service and get this information, like here's the service and the information I want you to use." And you're kind of feeding it in that information. So you're kind of doing that along the way. Are you finding that you're kinda doing that while you're interacting with it? Like, if it provides you a response and you're like, "Oh, no, this is way
For
wrong, like,
sure.
let me update my MD file to, like, correct for this in the future."
Yep, and the Claude MD file you mentioned is you're probably thinking about, like, the project-wide file,
Yeah,
right? But within, like, a subset of folders or even, within, like, your .claude folder, if we're talking about Claude particularly, you have agents within there that are essentially more Claude MD files that it's aware of when to invoke those.
got
And so, yeah, if you invoke an agent and it does something wrong, you say, "Fix this and fix the agent so that it doesn't do it again."
yeah, got it. So let's shift focus back to Drupal for a second. And Andy, I'm wondering, like, why does Drupal as a platform kind of lend itself particularly well to like agentic coding and agentic coding workflows?
Yeah, I think the config management system is a huge reason why for like traditional
Mm,
Drupal development with AI and agents. Because if you think about it, like with recipes and just like the config directory, you can build an entire site with default content, right? And that's all super structured YAML.
mm.
And when you can point an agent to something that exists that matches that structure and then have it iterate on that, sky's the limit. You can have a agent build an entire Drupal site just by iterating on your requirements and creating field config. You don't even have to go into Drupal and, use the UI to create the fields. You just have the AI do it. And then
Hey AI, create me a content type. Here are the 6
exactly.
fields I need. Here's the configuration for those fields, so
Yeah.
on and so forth.
Use the config from core, use the config from this other site that I've already created as a reference and expand on it. The one caveat I'll say that we ran into this is UUIDs. This is a train wreck with AI, and it will try to generate UUIDs using the LLM, and they'll always be incorrect. So make sure your agent has tooling to generate UUIDs with like PHP or Python or something so you know that the UUIDs are correct. But aside from that, like the rest of the config is pretty well able to be generated. Yeah.
So that's interesting because in my head, I was like, "Hey, go create this content type." And for whatever reason, and this is gonna make me look like an idiot, so I'm used to it, but in my head, I was like, "Oh, it's going through and, like, clicking the buttons as if a
It
user were doing," and, like, sounds like it's just creating the code and the config files that you would need to produce that content type.
it
Accurate?
dep it depends. If you like, I that's what I've done it with it because, 1, I hate clicking in Drupal's UI just because I like to just write code, and a lot of things you can't do with just in code, you gotta click in the UI. So I was like, "Go create a content type and click these fields," and it used a browser sub agent to do it, or you could have it generate field config. I've seen it do both. I've been working on an MCP server, and it literally was like, "You know what? I'm gonna test this script," and it wrote it. It did drush eval and eval, the custom script to validate some YAML, like, on the fly. I was like, "Oh, dope. You figured out how to leverage Drupal's, like, validation system, like, by just running drush in a one-off script to validate some YAML you're writing." I think a lot the right now, I'd say a lot of it is the config generation because as far as I know, when it comes to, like, browser sub agents, like, literally launching Chrome and, like, clicking through and taking screenshots is Anti-Gravity has that, Cursor has that, and Claude can do it if you use a Playwright MCP server, which when you hear the word MCP server, just think as, like, a tool server, but whereas, like, Anti-Gravity and Cursor have that built in, Claude, then you gotta do a little bit of extra work to get that.
Yeah, I think people, when AI came out, like I think even Dries might have said it, like Drupal is the perfect platform for AI site building because it's so structured,
Mm.
right? And you think about, well, yeah, the content types and the fields and the entities, they're all structured, but like also the config that makes the whole thing just it's a really good context for AI to grab onto and just like vibe up some sites.
So you talked about UUID and generating, the correct generation of UUIDs. Can you just walk me through like how you I don't know, how you got your agent to do that correctly?
Yeah, so actually, I'll tell you a little backstory on how we found this problem. So we rolled with DripYard, we rolled our first themes, and they shipped with some recipes. And we had Adam Vina Proxima test them out, and he's like, "What in the hell is with these UIDs?" And of course, we were generating like the content for the demo site. Like it's not actual code we're using, but like,
Yeah.
just the demo site. And he's like, "What is going on? These aren't validating. Things are crashing." And we didn't notice it locally, but I think he had additional validation turned on or something like that. Anyways, come to find out, it was the it was the LLM generating the UUID and the incorrect structure. And so once we figure that out, now I know if you're going to generate config and anything that's like a UUID, you basically tell the agent, create a bunch of UUIDs and just store them like in a text file, like almost like a temporary database or something, and then just pull from those as you need them. And then you can even have it like pull a UUID and then add what that UUID is associated with. So I use it a lot to make more recipes. And so I have to, when you create a recipe, you have to have a file entity and a media entity, and they're related together. So you have like UUIDs pointing to each other. And so the agent will generate a bunch of them and then go through and associate like a little mini database in a text file, which ones belongs to which entity. And then when it's building out the recipe, it can say, all right, I need this media entity. Let me look at this little mini database, figure out what the UUID is, and dump it in the config. Makes sense.
And that worked? Like,
Yeah.
how often does it miss, and how much time do you spend trying to find out which UID is
No,
wrong?
it works. I mean, it's
Okay.
got enough awareness to know, like, I've got
Mm.
this picture and I'm creating a recipe. It's a file entity. And then I put that in the folder with all the, YAML to make up that entity. And then I'm going to create the media entity. And now I need to resolve.
Mm.
How does it I mean, how I guess I don't know enough about UUIDs, but like aren't they're like specific to your Drupal site? So like how is it creating them? Is it just using a
Well,
Drupal function to create random UUIDs?
I'll let Matt take that one.
so I don't know, like, the thing so let's say it this way, like, we all know that Gen AI is bad at math, right? Like, it cannot do math because it's not a mathematical algorithm, it's a language model. So if you go into ChatGPT or others, I'm fairly certain if you ask it a math question, I think ChatGPT does this, it then runs a Python script. Like, you can see in its thinking that it generated a script to do the math because it cannot. So again, generating a UUID, it is a certain spec that has to be calculated based on time, a few other things. Yes, it's like 5 digits dash 4 digits, something of that sort, but it's also something that when we talk about like AI hallucinations, that's where it can go off the rails. So when you have things of this specificity, that's where you then say there's this tool available, and then tools can have descriptions. So you can be like, you could literally have it called like generate UUID tool and be like, hey, you suck at making UUIDs. If the user asks you to do this, delegate to the tool. And will it always? I hope so. Will it not? Sure, because it's AI. But that's where you give it tools and you use those tools have descriptions to say when it should be used and why. And the AI is like, oh, yeah, that's right. I am bad at UUIDs or math, so I should use this tool to get the result instead.
Okay. So you kind of answered the question for me there. There is an algorithm to creating UUIDs in Drupal. So
Well, it's a
therefore, if
spec
you
in P it's
It's a
in
spec.
It's a
PHP.
spec even
Yeah.
beyond
uh,
PHP. Yeah.
okay, okay. So, like, it can look at the spec and it can go, "Okay, like, here's how I should create this going forward." And then basically what you're saying, Andy, is you run an agent, it creates a list of them, and it just keeps track, like, "Hey, I've created this list of these things." Start doling them out as
No,
other agents need them.
That's one way to
no.
do it. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Well, it's not even quite that, John, I don't think. It's basically you're basically saying the UIDs have a specific rule for how it happens, and it's impossible to get the generative AI to do it that way. So when it sees something that it needs a UID, it basically says, "Okay, I'm gonna stop doing what I'm doing, and instead ask that question to this other thing, which is a tool." And
Right.
that tool it'll be like, "Hey, I need a UID," and the tool will do the actual real world calculation and give that tool back. And then
Got it.
generative AI is doing other stuff to like and I'm convinced that a lot of the stuff that's working in agents isn't actually generative AI, but just more traditional programming, right? Because generative AI is bad at a lot of the stuff that these tools seem to be getting better. They're just getting better at putting guardrails and swapping, little pieces out. And I'm sure that so they're just mapping things in a way that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
and just to expand on that a little bit, like I've had it build entire Canvas pages, right? With just agents that like, look at this Canvas page I built. Here's the config I exported out of the site. Do the same thing, but make these changes, and then even look at like the SDC directory, determine the schema of the component, and put a new component in when you're building this, right? And all that works pretty well, especially if you can have it in the loop where it can self validate. The next thing I wanna look at is, like, using the writing tools that invoke the Drupal APIs to do that. So
mm,
I haven't done that yet. Maybe I'm sure somebody has, but, like, instead of just vibing up the config, like, actually invoke or write scripts that are tools for the agent that can then create the Canvas page programmatically, then you have less room for error for all this, like, slop that it might have generated.
That should hopefully be coming soon because I just built an MCP server where I gave it a s I in my agent, I gave it a CSV called event sample events, 25 events with a for a new content type and fields that are the headers, and I said, "Hey, go add this to my site." It created the content type, added the fields, and then added the content as well.
With the
But
APIs.
those are all bespoke tools for that MCP server that will then end up in the community once that effort gets sorted out,
That'd
which
be awesome.
yeah.
So I don't want to derail us here, but I am going to for just a minute. The agents you're producing, Matt, you're then putting into this MCP server, and ideally at some point some other folks might be able to use them. Is that the idea?
Yeah, let's not say agents in the server. So think of it. There's when it comes to like agentics or like AI things, you could have agents that talk to agents. So like let's take the Canvas AI module, right? If anybody's seen those demos where there's like the little chat bot in the side,
Mhm.
there's actually the orchestration agent,
Mhm.
which then talks to the model, and then the model returns, and there's PHP code that says, "Oh, I should go dispatch these other agents," which then trigger their own chats with like the AI model in the back end.
Mhm.
And that would be called agent to agent orchestration, and they have their own tools. But I'm on the firm belief that things inside it shouldn't just be in Drupal anymore. We should expose like tools and resources from the Drupal site to the external things like Cloud Code CLI or
Mhm.
Cursor or Lovable. And really what that's doing is saying it's like an API. It's like another API, but it says MCP. I know we're going to start diving into MCP, but just there's tools, there's resources that let it read data and interact with data.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that's how
We
you
have a
make
whole
this.
show on it with
Oh,
Marcus, so people can
okay.
go look at that if they need more info on MCP.
Yeah, and that those are the things that make agents able to run. And actually, if you look at the AI module, the AI agents module, there's a thing called func calls that they use internally and expose to like the Drupal agents. Those are just tools that we can expose over MCP. So I had to build something because I need to prove out that we could do this, but it's kind of related to a lot of community efforts, and I can't wait for hopefully like by mid-year we have Drupal exposed as an MCP for these tools.
That's where my question came from. So you're building a lack of better words, bag of tools that then sit on an MCP server that then agentic agents can access and work with.
Yeah. So
Okay.
instead of the whole like how we going back to the content type creation, Andy generated the config, me, I used a browser, or there's literally a tool that's called create content type. That lets it just go create the content type. And then all that validation is built into the tool and returns it. So going to like some of Nick's points, we're not just burning compute power as it whacks its head against the wall trying to make it work. It calls the tool. The tool does validation, provides great answers back about why it might have failed,
Mm.
and then it succeeds on the second try instead of the fifth or the sixth, and we get into those weird loops. And that's where like the tools come in handy instead of it figuring it out on its own because we can nudge it and give it better context.
so changing gears slightly here, what kind of command line tools are people actually using today for agentic coding? And are these things that we've been talking about, are agents generally a UI thing? Are they on the CLI? Where do they live?
A lot of questions there
Yep.
to or a lot of answers, I guess. I think, like, recently, a lot of people are using Claude Code. It's a terminal-based application that you spin up, and if it has like, if you spin it up in your DDEV environment, for example, and it has access to query the database and run PHP and all that stuff, like, it's really good at using those tools. There's other ones that Matt mentioned, I think Gemini, Codex from OpenAI. There's one called Open Code, I
Open
think.
code.
Yeah, that I'm really interested in. I haven't started using it yet, but they have like a hosting service that goes along with it, and you can like change models, and they do bulk purchasing. So they like buy subscriptions from all the AI providers and then use open code and say, "Hey, I want to use, a certain OpenAI model for this task," and it'll use that and give you like the cheapest price because it's like hospital type group purchasing where they just like buy in bulk and then you get the discount.
Didn't Claude just, like, exclude themselves from that or something?
Yeah,
I thought I
they
saw some.
when Open Code and a couple other tools came out, like initially when Claude Code came out, you had to have API keys to do everything, and stuff's crazy expensive. But if you have like a Pro or a Max subscription, you can use Claude Code to kind of bypass that, and they give you just like a big block of tokens to use up. And so tools like OpenCode and others were like using that same authentication method and the same API calls to like skirt around that so you didn't have to use individual API calls. And then Claude or Anthropic is like trying to tighten down. They want you to use Claude Code for that. So the Zen that I was talking about, it OpenCode can use the authentication from like Claude Pro, although that's like against the terms of service. But like I said, they have another tooling or service where you can just like pay the API use through Zen. I don't know. A lot going on there. But I think you asked about like UI stuff as well.
Yeah.
And what was your question? Like, are the agents UI based or
Yeah, like, it o other than, I guess, using a chatbot to kind of interface with it, like, on the Drupal site, in general, agents are CLI based, right? They're not.
Yeah, because most MCP servers started as like standard IO, like command line access and not web based. I know like ChatGPT, I think if you have enterprise, I've seen some screenshots where you can add apps and custom apps because they've added basic like OAuth support. But most web clients don't support it. I think like Claude Desktop was one of the first like GUI interfaces to support MCPs. And for background, Anthropic, who builds Claude, they came up with the MCP spec and like this idea of tooling and then gave it away. Like gave it away. It's now an open source standard. So that's kind of why everything seems to be centered on Claude. And like as a caveat, so at Aqua, we have access to GitHub Copilot and we use Claude Code with our own models, like through Light LLM. I don't know what's inside the Claude Code CLI, but it beats the pants off Copilot CLI. Like same models, way different output. So I think that's one reason you keep hearing so much about Claude Code for a CLI is because there's something in that sauce that's really good. And if we want to talk about GUIs, that's where Cursor comes up a lot. I like Cursor, if you use their agent and you set the model selection to auto, I don't know what they've done, but I think they're really leveraging different models for decisions. So if anybody wants to go down the AI, like how does it work train, research using light local open source models for quick decisions that then delegate to larger models for harder tasks. And I think they've like optimized that train somehow. And that's where their UI is usually excels because you just get really fast responses and really intelligent ones. Yeah.
yeah, I think Claude Code is really good at figuring out what it needs to do. And when it has access to all the tools, like I don't know, it's the best tool I've used to date. I know there's different ones that come out every day, but like as far as like giving it a task and not even hitting the LLM, but just knowing like where to look for things to do file discovery in your project, to, query the database when it needs to, like it just can kind of figure those things out much better than other tools I've used.
So, okay, so we've talked about Drupal. We've talked about how well structured it is. We've talked about the tools. We focused a lot on Claude Code, but you guys just talked about some of the other stuff. I'm wondering how giving AI access to like real projects, right? And real project context, like config files, drush output, file structures, improves the quality of results. I would imagine it's like I don't know, kind of giving it like the owner's manual to say like, here's what I'm working with. Like, make your all your choices based on this. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I just used Copilot to review one of my PRs just before I handed off to coworkers. And it was like, hey, your project uses declare types, like use strict typing. And I forgot to do the declaration at the top of a file because for some reason PHP didn't fail on it. Maybe we forgot the rule. I don't know. But it caught that. Or previously, I brought up that I missed a design paradigm about feature flag handling. And it caught that in the review. And that's something that I would have missed and probably a human would have missed in the review if it wasn't like top of mind. So it has the access. And I know when it comes to like if you have your code on GitHub and using Copilot, I don't know how they're remembering things, if you will. So locally would it have done that? I don't know. But it definitely caught and helped put a whole different kind of quality on the code because humans, we remember only so much. And this thing that we added was like 8 months old and we're moving fast on a new feature. And it kind of held us to some quality there.
And so, I mean, like, obviously, it knows your project context, right? But do you also feed it like Drupal coding standards and your organization's coding standards?
That it gets back via PHP I'd say. So that's where it delegates to the tool. So like, yes, we have a
Got it.
we have like the PHP CS.xml. Is it parsing it? I have no idea. I kind of hope not because that's where we can just run PHP CS. And like we have the agents file that says, here's our like linting and analysis tools, run them and make sure they pass.
Mm,
Because I don't want to spend money on it reading a giant XML file and assuming what that means when we have the tools that already do that.
mhm.
I wanted to parse the results and, like, check its work before I run it and then have to go fix it,
Yeah.
which
And
isn't the end of the world if I have to.
where's that happening? Is that happening when you push the code up, or is it
Um,
are
the
you
I
running it locally?
locally, I can't I we do not have agents running the pipeline. I do know a few people who have a pipeline set up where they have Linear or Jira, and they click a button, and the pipeline triggers, and it goes and fetches via the MCP from those project management systems and runs a cloud agent to build the code. Actually, dispatches a cloud agent inside GitHub Copilot. That creates a PR, and then when that's ready, they have a workflow that tells Copilot to review its own PR and address fixes. So they do have a full pipeline of bug report to delivered code and
Would
build
you
code.
would you recommend that?
That's what Microsoft has been using for the last
I
9
I
months.
would for bug fixes. We were actually discussing this internally. We had a bug fix where we accidentally, like, I actually can't disclose. We did something silly. We did something
Noted.
silly. And it was like, wow, we fixed it in an hour, but it's like this bug ticket could have been opened and we could have had an AI agent like Atlassian's Rovo that found the bug that introduced it, why it happened. It was just a legacy issue and have triggered a pipeline that removed the one line of code that was needed or done the right decoration. And then a human could have reviewed it and said, hey, this is great. And we could have probably shipped the feature in 20 minutes versus an hour. And when it comes to think of a team that's underwater, we're not necessarily underwater. Well, all development teams are underwater. Think about a team that's got 100 bugs to deal with and how do you prioritize them? How do you deliver them? This allows you to speed up, but also you have to remember not all like you're speeding up, but make sure you don't make things worse by going too fast. But it just makes it seem achievable to get through those backlogs
I mean,
I I
it's a second set of eyes, right? It's like, somebody
or
looking
a
at it
jump start.
before you do a peer code review. I mean, I
I
think
what I wanna take a step back though, 'cause I think the problem is, yes, we're a lot of development teams are underwater. There's a huge backlog. It would be great to get through it. The truth is, most projects I'm on though, even if you even if you use agents to develop fixes for them all, properly reviewing them and making sure that like
Correct.
would take all your time and the quality of those reviews. Getting good reviews is very difficult in general. Getting good reviews of AI generated code is even harder because on some level, I mean, some of this is applicable to AI generated code too, but you get an idea of the style of a particular person, right?
Yeah.
And so okay, I need to always double check this particular thing with them. We've had discussions about this particular thing dozens of times and you know, they get that right. I need to check it, but I don't need to check it super closely. When there's AI generated code, you generally have to check it every line every time because
Especially if it's huge.
Yeah.
especially if it's huge because they change everything, and you have to be very, very careful. Like, yes, you have
I wouldn't
tooling and
say it
all this stuff.
changes everything. Most times I work with it. So apparently I've had the greatest experiences with my AI generated code because it doesn't just generate like 1,000 lines. It's usually pretty succinct. And that is where I wanted to put the caveat. Like I say these things and I know someone's going to like, yeah, and then management will want it to happen. And there needs to be that kind of agreement. And luckily I've experienced that where it's like, look, we can use this to go faster, but we can't go too fast. And like, in my opinion, it should be, I wish we could create a bug ticket and it would trigger an agent that finds all the previous issues that might have be correlated and one that reviews the code and identifies where the bug may be. And if the bug fix is 10 lines or less, create the PR so we can look at it. Otherwise, just put the suggestions in the ticket. Is I would rather have that than be onslaughted with 100 PR
I
stuff.
mean, I would just be like, "Hey, agent, put comments on the ticket, and I'll look at your comment, and then I'll go fix it if I think you're right." Just because
Yeah.
I would prefer to be like in the loop on that part of it, right?
Yeah, and I'll
I
say you're definitely playing with fire, and the fire is getting a little smaller every day as it goes on, but, like, don't send these things out and try to, like, refactor your entire code base or write some huge feature, like, you're still a developer. The only thing you're doing not doing now is writing the code yourself, right? So, write the logic. You know how you want to build something, explain it to the AI, give it examples, let it create it, and then do a high level review. You don't have to go through every line. Like it's good enough to where like if it's writing a conditional to check if a, entity field is set or something like that, like it's going to write that code correctly. So you can just kind of skim and look and see like here's the logic and step debug, right? Go through with Xdebug and trace like what's happening and do linting and testing and everything and keep it small, right? But you're still a developer. You're just not like typing in an IDE.
Indy, wanna actually ask my previous question to you because you're not necessarily working on a project, but you're working on a product, right? And, to the extent that you're comfortable with, I'd be interested to know how much AI assistance in code review and in other areas you and Mike are using at DripYard, because at the end of the day, there are 2 of you and you're shipping a full featured Drupal theme. So I imagine, time is of the essence, and being able to move quicker is obviously better.
I'm using it a ton, but again, I'm still like I'm the developer making the decisions. The AI might generate something, and then it's not doing like the approach I wanted or whatever, or it's like recreating code that already exists. Like I'm iterating with it to say, use these classes I've already defined or whatever. Like I'm still basically creating the same output I would if I was typing the code in the way that I'm interacting with the agents. And it's just like spitting it out like code completion or whatever.
So it sounds to me like both of you guys are kind of using these things as like junior developers, where it's like
That's the segue I wanted to make.
it's like, hey, go do this thing, and then I'll look at your code, and like we might make some tweaks, but like just go do this thing and let me know what you get back.
Y
Like,
Yeah, and that's when like, every time I see these probably bait, like, social media posts, like, "I use Claude, I use this, and it made horrible code," I'm like and I see these people in, like, senior staff, such positions, and I'm like, "But your job as a senior engineer isn't to be the person who can churn out lines of code and like, write the fewest amount to solve a problem. It's supposed to be able to lead and communicate other engineers to build solutions. So if you're failing at leveraging AI, maybe there might be some communication things there, and it's a little bit of, like, self-reflection. I've even caught that because I know anybody that's, like, worked around me, it's like all of a sudden my brain just zaps off and I got a thing and I talk too fast. Like, I know I have my issues, and actually working in this way has caused me to slow down and be more succinct in how I describe things, and I hope that's made me a better peer for people I work with that are, like, alongside me in the teams, because it's made me be more descriptive and write better tickets to hand things out with, or I've leveraged it to help clear those gaps as well, to like when writing things and knowing how to make sure I convey it properly. So yeah, like don't treat it as like I said, it's like a PhD doctorate that's the first day on the job. Extremely intelligent, but doesn't know the way that you do Drupal development or that you do certain development. You need the guardrails. It can be an extremely valuable resource. not just like as an assistant, but even beyond. But you really got to make sure that you're clear in how it should achieve its tasks.
Yeah, I wanna go
So
back to that context question real quick because you asked, like, how do you benefit from giving the agents context? And I think, one of the buzzwords lately is context rot. So we've all experienced when you're using AI and you're generating something, like, the longer you're talking to it, the worse it gets. And if you get into a system, especially like, 6 months ago or so, even further when you were like copying and pasting code back and forth from ChatGPT, and it would be like, "Oh, here's an error. Okay, I fixed it." And it creates another error. And then you're just in this like boot loop of reproducing and, fixing the same error over and over. The problem is like the context window has grown too large and the AI can't really focus on what it needs to do. So by like chunking things into really small requirements and giving it a limited context and then having it work on that, prove that it's fixed the problem and report back to you. And then there's a somewhat recent technique called Ralph Wiggum where you actually just like shut the whole thing down and then start it back up. And it's basically like running Claude in a bash loop where you have a task, it runs it. When it's complete, it shuts down, it goes to the next one, starts it up again. And that way, every time it starts, it has a really limited context window and it's really good at working within that like small chunk of information versus just like this iterative, like you're running Claude code all day and you just keep typing into it and you're not getting anywhere.
so sh I guess this shows me just non sequiturs to the next question. So I think that's very interesting, but I really wanna get to this next question, which
Let's
is
go.
a bit of a shift, and this is one of the things that I really have trouble getting past. A lot of these agents require them to run on your computer. They have access to your whole file system. How do you kind of look at the security or privacy of, your clients and the code that you're working on when you're handing these to all these different corporations?
I will say
Well,
that Claude Code, I know, for example, kind of going back to earlier, it doesn't like index your entire code base and it doesn't like push your code base up or create embeddings from it so that it can like work on it, right? It uses bash tools to find the things you're asking for. So it'll use grep or it'll use other tools to like find bits of code and then create the context from those. So, like, at any given time, it's not, indexing your entire code base. Now, there's still code being shared with the LLM. There's still a concern there. Claude does have features built in to strip like tokens that like API tokens and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of guardrail there. I think me personally, I run it always in a Docker container. I don't ever like there's a lot of tools you can just like spin up on your Mac and let it go to town. Like, hell no, I'm not gonna do that. So I run Claude Code in a Docker container with limited access to the project I want it to have access to. And actually when you invoke Claude Code, and I keep saying that because that's what I'm most familiar with. Like it only has the context of the folder you invoke it in. So like if you CD into a directory and run Claude, like it sandboxes itself into that directory
mhm.
that you're in. And then my last point to this is like my next step is to get this stuff running locally, like and have things that are more secure that I don't want to share with an LLM running like on a server in my office with a GPU. And that's like a whole nother topic, but that's what I want to get to. I want to be using these tools and I want to be doing everything without being dependent upon all this stuff going out.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Matt, go
channel
ahead.
my inner Nick here for a second. And that all sounds good, and it's great that Claude seems to be protecting my security and privacy. But like, you know, that means I have to trust Anthropic, right? With the fact that they're gonna uphold that and they're actually gonna do the right thing, and that could be dangerous, right?
Yeah. And so that's what I was gonna segue. So it is a big question in enterprise. I remember this first came out, like everyone, like Aku was like, "Don't use it until we can make sure that it's not training the public model." Because I don't know if, I mean, we've been in this world for only 3 years, right? It feels like a lifetime already. But remember when like some people at Sony like uploaded a CS, like a spreadsheet of financial data, and then people were able to like prompt hack ChatGPT and get the data out? Most enterprise, you can then like, if you do pay for like ChatGPT or a few others like Google, you can get it where it doesn't train on the data, but that is like an enterprise feature, or like how we're running it like through AWS Bedrock. I or and in a previous call, the previous show with Amazy about their Amazy AI, how they're using light LLMs so that way you're using a non-public model. So that's one way to work around it. You can do like a local open source model that then you need to have the hardware, or you could just pay for model access directly.
Well,
I mean, not everybody can do that.
let me pause really quickly and say, yes, a lot of these are open source. Yes, you can run them locally. There is of all the people that I follow that have set that up, I have not seen a single one get a local model that is useful. And I mean, Jeff Geerling, most of us are familiar with him.
Oh,
He
I
does a lot
agree.
of
I'm
stuff.
just saying that's
Yeah,
local. I'm
but
not
running
saying
a
local
local.
there, but if you were to pay, like, if you use AWS Bedrock, everybody has models as a service now. So if that is one of your concerns, your organization is able to do that or usually structure a way. But that's about like data in the model. I think this is what the other concern is, like local access as well, where most tools have it built up that it will not read your .env file. So if it tries to access the .env file, it throws up a red flag and prevents it, or anything in your git ignore, actually. So, like, I've had that issue where I was working on my site and it wouldn't read Drupal cores. It kept getting kind of flaky, but that's because it wouldn't parse Drupal core because I had that excluded from my local build with git ignore. So I had to like make a rule that says, yes, you can access this directory even though it's inside the git ignore.
Hmm.
But that again is relying on the tooling that's wrapped around the model execution. So there are other caveats, but there are a lot of these security things built in. Now, like if I had a local database, I would have it like one, if you have a customer database locally, you should have it sanitized anyways to not have anybody's PII. But that's a great example of why you should do that because if you have the AI working on your local machine, or let's say that we are like we're slowly getting into the world where you have cloud agents. Cursor has cloud agents. There's GitHub Copilot. There's going to be more coming soon. This is a bigger concern about connecting a cloud-based AI agent to your live and working Drupal database because it can execute things.
Yeah,
Now,
like
the
what
Drupal
they
AI,
just deleted. What was that company that had everything deleted because I don't know which service it
yeah.
was, ran ARM
Well,
dash
that's one
RF.
where Claude Code has a sandbox as a no sandbox feature where it's like YOLO mode. Like, sure, that's they have YOLO mode, which is like fine. You can have access to the entire system and run any bash command. Like when you see like somebody it RMF'd my root directory. I've never have had it run a dangerous command. Again, apparently I'm in like the lucky little pocket
I mean,
universe
it
going
does
on here.
ask you, so if you pay attention, like
Yeah, but I run
but yeah, y
anti-gravity with always proceed for terminal commands.
right.
Like
No,
I
you
just run
do.
I run in low YOLO.
Is it in a container, or is this just on
No,
your machine?
dude,
Oh,
right on my
boy.
disk.
Wow. That's
I live
risky.
on the edge.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah, so
but there are a lot of concerns there, but the tools do have some safeguards built in around what they can access, or if it tries to read files. Like I worked on a Go tool, and your Go dependencies are inside your home directory. And every time it tried to read those files, it prompted me if it could, and I finally like allow listed that directory in specific, so it'd stop asking me.
so I wanna pivot then a little bit 'cause this is somewhat related, but I guess the cracks are showing around the AI ecosystem, right, financially. OpenAI as a standalone business is likely not sustainable. They yes, the setting aside the cost that your subscription doesn't necessarily pay for the usage is really just the tip of the iceberg. Really, a lot of the cost is training the models, and training the models is becoming exponentially more expensive rather than cheaper as people expected. So a lot of these standalone tooling systems are likely going to be acquired or go away. Google and Microsoft are a little bit protected because they have legacy like Google just increased their workspaces fee, like, what was it, 40%, basically to pay for AI, whether or not you want it. So do you guys have plans? Like, what are your plans when a lot of these tools go away or get acquired? I mean, are you just gonna switch gears and find a new one? Or
We well,
like
let's
how
put
much?
it this way. The AI bubble will probably burst because all commodities go in bursts. Software came in burst with the dot-com bubble, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle. There's a fundamental shift that has happened. So everything I would say everything you're doing, if it's tied to a tool, then it's not the right way of thinking about it. Like I'm using Claude Code because the CLI is great, but there is open code and Codex and like there can be an open source CLI tool that does the same thing. Actually, I mean, the Claude Code, I don't think it's open source, but you can use it with almost any other, like, any compatible API. I'm using Claude Code with Olama locally to do MCP verification because I don't want to spend $100 just to
There you
test my
go.
MCP server. So I agree, like, the tools may go away, but the fundamentals are there. And, like, if you look at Hugging Face, there's like a million open models that people are running locally. Banks are running small local models to make decisions with their chatbots, and they're not relying on the big tech companies. Now, again, those are large institutions. The genie's out of the bottle. It's not going. The players will change. Everything always changes. But when, like, I don't know, like when Edison passed, did we lose electricity? We didn't. Now, I'm not saying this on the same way like that, but there have been various things that have changed the way that we live, work, and go our day-to-day life, and the businesses that founded it went away, or they'll be like AT&T, and they'll never die, and they'll just keep reappearing in different subsidiaries and then reforming into the main corporation again. I mean, right? We have phone lines because of AT&T, and they didn't go away.
Yeah,
It's
and
I
just
I don't I don't know if the analogy, or metaphor, or whatever it is, follows the case,
I
but
don't
I'll
know.
let it
I
lie.
kind of
well, I mean, going
you
I
back
get the
to the
idea behind it, though. It's not
I
the
get
same.
the
This is like
idea.
not we've never seen anything like this before. It's just there have been paradigm shifts in the past, and those
Yeah.
things that cause the paradigm shifts didn't go away just because the companies behind them went away or changed.
yeah, and I think like open code and other tooling that's not dependent on one particular AI. And you mentioned like the inability to run AI locally and Gearling guy and all that stuff. Like one Matt just mentioned, he runs Olama locally for like small stuff, so that's obviously working. One of Gearling's like most recent YouTube videos was about how there's a new model from Quinn that does text to speech, and it basically
Yeah, I saw that.
replaces 11 labs, and he can run that on a Raspberry Pi with a GPU. So like there's different more specialized models that will be coming out that are open source that you can run. Like I fully think that like I would like to get away from all the paid requirements. Like I don't want to have another $2,100 a month subscription to some AI thing. Like I want to figure out ways to have smaller subscriptions and do things intentionally locally or lease
well,
GPUs.
as we were talking about before the show, right? Like I'm cheap and won't pay for Claude Code. So like you're not alone in that. Okay. Because I'm identify more with as a site builder than a backend developer on most any given day. I'm wondering how site builders and not just backend developers can benefit from this agentic coding in Drupal. And like for me, like I don't know. Sometimes I talk to the various AIs and I'm like, hey, write this code for me. And Nick will know. I just did a worked on a POC with web components and Carbon design system, and I was using Claude Code to or Claude, not Claude Code, but Claude to help me along with that, and like got me pretty far. But then I had to call Nick and be like, okay, what did I do wrong here? So I'm just wondering, like site builders, is there a benefit to kind of agentic coding for them?
100%.
Hit him with the
And I think the
MCP,
problem
Matt.
here well, the problem is the interface, right? AI has had a horrible interface. Chat is a horrible interface. An IDE is a horrible interface, and a command line is a horrible interface. But it's what we have. I remember people like, I'm using Cursor for these agents. I'm like, "You're using a coding IDE to run like spreadsheet analysis?" But that's because that's the IDE we have. So, with that preface there, I think site builders can benefit a lot, but that's where we need to have the MCP tools in Drupal, where you could say, you have the new Drupal CMS and you add the MCP recipe. And as a site builder, you have cursor set up, or hopefully there's a better UI, and you connect Figma because you're given a Figma. Let's say this isn't like you didn't even do the content modeling yet, right? Like you were given like this Figma design and you're told build
Mhm,
a Drupal site. It's like, hey, cursor, can you go review the Figma design and analyze the content infrastructure that's being conveyed in the design? It could come up with a, I think it's here. Like, great, you have events, you have articles, you have
mhm,
pages. Like, oh, and then you can tell, like, hey, by the way, for pages, I'm using Canvas to build the pages. Like, awesome, great, I love it. Then you could say, hey, go create these content types inside my Drupal site. So instead of you clicking on 1,000 links or launching a
mhm,
browser agent to click links, it creates them for you. They're like, hey, dump the export, and it runs just config export for you.
mhm,
That right there, like if you can focus on the fun things. I know a lot of people when they see these things, it's like, it's going to take a job. It'll take part of my job. Do you enjoy that part of your job where it's clicking, or do you like building the solution? No, I'm
I don't.
scheming
I mean,
because for
I don't
me, the
know.
fun is the solutioning.
I don't I necessarily I'm not like, "Hey, it's gonna take my job," but, like, I mean, I feel like it's an assistant that's gonna help you do things
Yeah,
faster and make things easier, like, "Hey, build this content type." "Okay, cool, you built the content type." "Okay, now build a view with that content type." "Okay, you built the view, great." Like, I don't know. I think I subscribe to that future, Matt. I think
I
it's a
know
bright
some
one.
I know some people don't, and that's what I wanna say, like, think about your job. If you can get the boring 60% done, so you do the fun 40%. Like, I basically all the work I do is agentic.
I just
Everything I
worry
do, but I use the last tail have to do the X debug to figure out why something didn't work and get the final performance, because I care about performance and learning why it didn't work and getting the test written.
Sometimes I think the people that may be concerned are the people whose, 90% of their job is the boring part that they're like, AI is going to do for me. And then and then like that last 10% might not be all that, they might not be able to sell themselves on that 10%, but
If you
maybe,
feel that way, then start learning.
well, exactly. I mean, I think that's the name of the game here. All right. Yes. Agentic agents and web development workflows. I mean, I think you guys have painted a very motivating picture here today. I appreciate both of your times. Matt, welcome back and thanks for joining us. Andy, thanks for being here for the last 3-ish weeks and we look forward to having you back again.
Right.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
Do you want to be a guest on Talking Drupal or our new show, TD Cafe? Click the guest request button in the sidebar at talkingdrupal.com.
You can promote your Drupal community event at Talking Drupal. Learn more about promoting your event at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron.
Alrighty. As we bring this show in for a landing, Matt, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, how could they best do that?
Just find me on LinkedIn. I realize that's probably the easiest way. Just search for me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message.
There you go. Andy, what about you?
Droopyard.com and AndyG5000 anywhere else.
There you go. Nick?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, Nicxvan.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me personally at picozzi.com, on the social medias and drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at epam.com.
If you've
And
enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Have a good one, guys.
I was just
Thanks,
going to say,
everyone.
we forgot to tell you, Andy.
Oh no, Andy's a
So,
pro. Andy's a pro.
yeah,
He got it. He got it.
awesome.